Amara's sneakers skidded across wet concrete as she bolted through the courtyard gate, the pit bull's leash torn clean out of her grip, dragging behind him like a whip. Wrong name. She caught herself mid-thought, chest heaving, because that woman didn't exist here. Not Amara. Julia. Tightened. No, stop. The dog didn't stop. He hit the second gunman at full speed, 70 pounds of muscle and rage colliding with a man twice his size, and the scream that followed wasn't human enough to belong to anyone who'd walk away clean. Julia didn't think. She grabbed the hose still running behind her, cranked the nozzle, and blasted the dog sideways off the man's throat, water and blood spraying across the marble tile in the same breath. If you've ever had 30 seconds where the wrong move meant somebody died, hit subscribe now, because this story only gets tighter from here. Move, move. A voice like gravel dragged over steel cut through the chaos, and a wall of a man came through the courtyard doors at a dead run, tattoos climbing out of his open collar and up the side of his throat. Julia froze for exactly 1 second, long enough to see the ink crawling across his knuckles, the way his eyes went straight past her to the dog, to the man bleeding out on his marble. "He's not going to make it," she said, breathless, still gripping the hose like a weapon. "Neither is your dog. If somebody doesn't help me hold him." The man didn't answer her. He crossed the courtyard in 4 strides, dropped to one knee beside the wounded guard, and pressed 2 fingers to his throat with a calm that didn't match anything else happening around them. "Salvatore, look at me." His voice dropped, quieter now, almost gentle. "You're not dying today. Not on my floor." Behind him, Titan was still snarling, straining against the leash Julia had wrapped twice around her fist, muzzle inches from snapping shut on air. She planted her feet, leaned her whole weight back, and held. "Somebody needs to get him off me," she said through gritted teeth. Now would be ideal. That was when he finally turned and looked at her. Really looked. And something in his face shifted, like he was recalculating an equation he thought he already knew the answer to. "You're still holding him." I noticed. Most people would have let go and run. Most people didn't drive 40 minutes for a house call that turns out to be an ambush. She adjusted her grip as Titan lunged again, dragging her half a step across the wet tile. "I don't suppose anyone's going to explain what just happened here." He didn't answer that either. Instead, he stood, crossed to her in 3 long strides, and closed his hand over hers on the leash. Not gently, but not rough, either. Just certain, like he'd done it before. "Let go," he said. "He'll take your arm off." "He won't." "Let go." She did, because something about the way he said it left no room for negotiation, and the second the leash transferred to his fist, Titan's entire body changed. The snarl died in his throat. His ears dropped. 70 pounds of muscle that had just torn through a grown man went still and silent, pressing his skull into the man's palm like he was asking to be forgiven. "That's not possible," Julia breathed. "He only listens to 2 people," the man said, not looking at her, eyes still on the guard now being dragged inside by 2 others. "Me, and apparently whoever just spent the last 10 minutes bathing him instead of running when he growled. I don't run from dogs. Everyone runs from this dog. Then everyone's doing it wrong." She wiped blood-streaked water off her forearm with the back of her hand, and it was only then, in the sudden quiet, that she let herself really look at him, at the ink covering both forearms, disappearing under rolled sleeves, climbing his neck in sharp black lines, at the way 3 more men in dark suits had appeared at the courtyard's edge without a single word from him, just waiting. This was not a man who owned a dangerous dog. This was a man dangerous dogs were trained by. "What's your name?" he asked. "Does it matter? You're not paying me enough to stick around and find out what happens next." Something almost like amusement moved across his face, there and gone in half a second. "Wrong. I'm paying you exactly enough." He nodded toward the guard being carried inside, toward the blood already drying rust-brown on the marble. "Nobody walks off my property after seeing this. Not until I decide what happens to them. Tell me in the comments, would you have stayed and demanded answers, or run the second that gate opened? Julia's stomach dropped. Not fear exactly. Something worse. The cold, clear understanding that she'd just become a witness to whatever this man's life actually was, and witnesses didn't get to just collect their check and drive home. "And if I decide I'd rather leave," she said, "what happens then?" He crouched again beside Titan, one hand still buried in the dog's fur, and looked up at her with an expression she couldn't read at all. "Then we're going to have a very different conversation," he said. "One you won't like nearly as much as this one." Titan pressed closer against the man's leg, and only then did Julia notice the second thing wrong with the courtyard. A phone, cracked and still lit, lying face down near a drain grate where the wounded guard had fallen. "That's not mine," she said, nodding toward it. "Is it his?" The man's eyes flicked to it for half a second too long. "Leave it. I'm not touching it. I'm telling you it's been recording." Every man in that courtyard went still. Marco. The name came out flat, controlled, but the muscle in his jaw told a different story. One of the suited men peeled off and crossed to the phone, crouching to lift it with 2 fingers like it might detonate. "Boss, screen's locked, but it's live, cameras on." "Since when?" "Since before the dog got loose." Julia watched something pass behind the man's eyes that she couldn't name. Not panic. He didn't seem built for panic, but recalculation, fast and sharp. The same look he'd given her in the first 30 seconds, except now it was aimed at everyone else in the courtyard. "Salvatore didn't do this," he said quietly, more to himself than to Marco. "He's loyal. He's been loyal 11 years. So maybe it's not about Salvatore," Marco said. "Maybe it's about who was standing next to him when Titan went off leash." Every head turned toward Julia at once. "Oh, don't," she snapped, stepping back, hands up. "I've been here 40 minutes. I don't even know whose house this is." "That's the problem," the man said, straightening to his full height, and for the first time since he'd walked through those doors, his voice carried an edge aimed directly at her. "Everyone who comes through that gate knows exactly whose house this is before they park the van. I got a call this morning. A number, no name, cash job, difficult client. That's it. That's everything I know." She held his gaze, refusing to look away first, because looking away first was how you ended up on the wrong side of a conversation like this one. "If somebody used me to get a camera onto your property, I promise you, I'm finding out just as fast as you are." Silence stretched long enough that Titan whined and butted his head against the man's palm, and something about that small, ordinary gesture seemed to pull him back from wherever his thoughts had gone. "Take her inside," he said finally. "Not the cells. The kitchen. Boss." "The kitchen, Marco." Julia's pulse spiked at the word cells, casual as anything, like he'd said guest room. "You have cells," she said. "In your house." "I have a lot of things in my house." He crouched one more time, murmuring something low to Titan that she couldn't hear, and the dog finally sat, calm as a statue, watching her with the same unreadable focus his owner had. "You're going to sit in my kitchen, drink whatever Marco brings you, and answer some questions. After that, one of 2 things happens. Which are, either you go home tonight with triple what I already owe you, and you forget you were ever here." He stood, and for the first time, close enough that she caught the faint copper smell of blood still on his hands, mixed with something warmer, cedar, maybe, or leather. "Or I find out you're lying to me, and we have a much longer conversation." "That's not much of a choice." "It's the only one you've got, Julia." She hadn't told him her name. Her whole body went cold, and he saw it land. Saw the exact moment she realized he'd known before she ever said it, probably before she'd pulled into his driveway, probably from whatever file existed on anyone who ever got cleared to set foot on this property. "You had my name this whole time," she said slowly. "I have everyone's name." "Then why ask?" "Because I wanted to see if you'd give it to me honestly." Something shifted in his voice, quieter now, almost approving. "You did. That matters more than you think in my line of work." Marco cleared his throat from the doorway, phone now bagged in plastic like evidence. "Boss, camera's still transmitting. Whoever's on the other end just watched the whole thing." The man's face didn't change, but his hand found Titan's collar again, gripping it like an anchor. "Then whoever's watching already knows what happens to people who try to use my dog against me." He looked back at Julia one final time before turning toward the house. "Get her inside. And somebody find out how a locked, live-streaming phone ended up on my property without a single alarm going off." The moment he disappeared through the doors, Marco's grip closed around Julia's arm, not violent, but final, the kind of hold that made clear this wasn't a request. "This way," he said. She went, because there wasn't a version of this where she didn't, but her mind was already running through every second of the last hour, searching for the one detail that would tell her whether she'd walked into an ambush meant for the Mafia boss. or one meant for her. The kitchen was nothing like she expected. No marble, no gold, just warm terracotta tile and copper pots hanging from a rack, the kind of kitchen a grandmother would have built with her own hands. Marco set a glass of water in front of her and left without a word, posting himself just outside the door like a shadow that had learned to stand still. Julia wrapped both hands around the glass and didn't drink. She counted 4 minutes before the man came in, tattoos still visible where his collar hung open, but his hands scrubbed clean now, no trace of Salvatore's blood left on them. "He's stable," he said, before she could ask. "Cut deep, not fatal. My cousin's a trauma surgeon. He's on his way." "That's not really what I was worried about." "No." He pulled out the chair across from her and sat, close enough that she caught the cedar smell again, stronger this time. "You were worried about yourself." "Smart. So which is it, the money and forgetting, or the long conversation?" "That depends entirely on the next 5 minutes." He folded his hands on the table, and for a man who'd just watched his guard nearly bleed out on his floor, his voice stayed maddeningly level. "Tell me exactly how you got this job. Every detail. The call, the number, the person who set the price." She walked him through it. The block number, the voice that never gave a name, the offer that was triple her going rate for someone who isn't afraid of blood. When she got to that last part, something tightened behind his eyes. "Say that again." "Someone who isn't afraid of blood." That's exactly what they said. Nobody outside this house uses that phrase. He said it quietly, almost to himself, then looked up at her sharp enough that she flinched. "That's what I told Marco to say when he called the last 3 groomers who quit on me. Word for word." "So either Marco's lying to you," Julia said slowly, "or somebody close enough to hear him say it decided to use it against you." The silence that followed had weight to it. "You understand what you just did?" he said finally. "I told you the truth. You told me my own house is compromised." He stood, dragging a hand down his face, and for the first time she saw something underneath the control, not fear, but exhaustion, the specific kind that came from carrying a war nobody else could see. 3 groomers in 2 months. All of them quit within a day of meeting Titan. All of them terrified. And you're the first person who didn't run. "Maybe that's the problem," she said. "Maybe whoever's doing this expected another groomer who'd bolt at the first growl, and instead they got someone who held the leash." He finished it for her, and something in the way he said it made her stomach flip in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "If you were in Julia's chair right now, walk away with the cash, or stay and find out who set this up. Drop your answer below, because it changes everything that happens next." He crossed to the window, looking out at the courtyard where the blood had already been hosed away, like it had never happened at all. "You have a choice to make. I need someone Titan trusts, someone who can be here daily until I find out who's feeding information out of my house. It pays more than you'll make in a year at that shop on." He paused, catching himself. "You know where my shop is. I know everything about you, Julia. I knew it before you got out of your van." He turned back to face her, and the honesty in it was almost worse than if he'd lied. "I've had everyone who comes near this house. It's not personal. It's survival. It feels personal. It's about to become personal," he said, "if you say yes. And if I say no, then Marco drives you home with enough cash to cover whatever you owe on that shop, and you never hear from me again." His jaw tightened, like the words cost him something. "I won't pretend that's the safer option, though. Whoever wanted a camera on this property tonight knows your face now, too." The threat wasn't a threat, not really. It was a fact, laid bare, and somehow that honesty made it land harder than any warning could have. "You're telling me I'm already in this," she said, "whether I want to be or not. I'm telling you I'd rather have you in it where I can protect you, than out there where I can't." His voice dropped, rougher now, like he hadn't meant to say that much. "Titan doesn't warm to people. He didn't warm to me for the first year I had him. He warmed to you in 20 minutes. Dogs aren't a character reference. This one is." He held her gaze, and for one unsteady second, the Mafia boss disappeared entirely, and what was left underneath looked almost like a man asking for something he wasn't used to needing. "Stay? 1 week. If you still want to walk after that, I'll drive you home myself." Behind him, footsteps sounded in the hall, fast, uneven, wrong, and Marco appeared in the doorway with his phone raised, face drained of color. "Boss, you need to see this. Whoever had the camera just posted the footage." He turned the screen around. "And they tagged it with your name. Your real one." The man went very still, the way a held breath goes still right before it breaks. Show me. Marco set the phone on the table between them, and Julia watched his face while he watched the screen, watched the muscle in his jaw work once, twice, before he finally spoke. Whoever posted this wants people to know I'm still using that name, he said low. Which means whoever posted this isn't some rival crew. It's someone who knew me before Dario Cani ever existed. Before. Julia stopped herself, but he caught it anyway. Go ahead. Ask. That's not your real name. It's the only name that's mattered in 11 years. He pushed the phone back, toward Marco, without looking at it again. The name on that footage belongs to a man who died the night I built this house. Only 3 people alive know it. 2 of them are standing in this kitchen. And the third? His silence answered before he did. The third is the reason Salvatore's on a table right now instead of walking around with the rest of my men. Marco shifted his weight by the door. Boss, if it's who I think it is. It's not a guess, Marco. Nobody else knew to use that phrase with the groomers. Nobody else would drag up that name. He dragged a hand through his hair, and for the first time, Julia saw the calculation slip entirely, replaced by something rawer. My brother's supposed to be in Palermo. He gave his word he wouldn't come near this house again. Your brother did this? Julia's voice came out sharper than she meant it to. Your brother sent a camera into your own courtyard, knowing your dog might kill someone? My brother doesn't care who bleeds, as long as it isn't him. He said it flatly, like a fact he'd made peace with a long time ago, though his hands, braced now against the table's edge, told a different story. He wants the house. He's wanted it since our father died, and left it to me instead of him. This isn't the first time he's tried to make it look like I can't control what happens inside these walls. So this wasn't about me at all. No. He looked at her then, and something in his expression softened even through the tension still coiled in his shoulders. But it is now? He's seen your face on that footage. He knows Titan responded to you instead of running. That makes you useful to him, a way to get to me that isn't a bullet. Marco's phone buzzed again, and whatever color had returned to his face drained straight out of it. Boss, it's already got 400 shares. Someone commented. He hesitated. Read it. Asked Dario who really trained that dog to kill. The kitchen went silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and Titan's claws clicking against the tile as he padded in from the hallway, pressing his skull against the man's leg like he could feel the temperature of the room dropping. That's a lie, the man said quietly. I trained him myself. Every command, every hour, alone, because I didn't trust anyone else near him after what happened to the last dog my brother got his hands on. Julia's stomach turned. What happened to the last dog? He didn't answer that. He didn't have to. The way his hand tightened in Titan's fur, protective and haunted at once, told her everything the words wouldn't. I need you to understand something, he said instead, turning back to her, voice dropping into something almost pleading, though pleading didn't seem like a shape his voice was built for. Whatever you decide tonight, stay, go, take the money and run. My brother now knows your name too. That's not a threat from me. That's just what's true the second that footage went live. So the choice you offered me an hour ago isn't really a choice anymore. No, he admitted. I'm sorry for that. I never wanted you dragged into a war that isn't yours. You didn't drag me into it. Julia stood, chair scraping against the tile, anger and fear tangled together in her chest, until she couldn't tell which one was driving her voice. Your brother did. And unless I'm wrong, the safest place for me right now isn't my apartment 2 hours from here. It's wherever the one dog in this city who trusts me happens to be standing. Something moved across his face. Surprise, maybe, or the beginning of something he didn't have a name for yet. You'd stay, he said. Knowing all of that. I'd stay, she said, because I don't like being used as a pawn in someone else's game. And staying is the only version of this where I get to decide that for myself. Marco's phone buzzed a third time, and this time when he looked down, his whole posture changed. Boss. His voice cracked on the word. He's not just posting footage anymore. He just texted the number that hired her this morning. Marco turned the screen around one last time, and even from across the table, Julia could read the words before he said them aloud. It says, tell Dario I'll be at the house by midnight. And tell his new girl to enjoy the next few hours. They might be her last. Titan's head snapped toward the door before anyone in the kitchen even moved, a low growl building in his chest like a generator winding up. He's early, the man said. And for the first time all night, real urgency cracked through his composure. Midnight isn't a deadline. It's a courtesy. He's already close. How do you know that? Because Titan only makes that sound for one person. He was already moving, pulling a gun from a holster Julia hadn't even clocked beneath his jacket, checking the chamber with the same calm he'd used to check Salvatore's pulse. Marco, perimeter now? Cameras, gates, everything. I want eyes on every inch of that fence line in the next 90 seconds. Marco vanished down the hall at a dead run. He turned to Julia, and the softness from moments ago was gone, replaced by something harder, faster, built for exactly this. Upstairs. Second door on the left. Lock it. Don't open it for anyone but me or Marco. And leave you down here with Titan against however many men your brother brought. I've done this before. Not with a live audience posting it in real time. You haven't. She planted her feet, the same stubborn stance she'd used holding the leash an hour ago. You said it yourself. He wants to prove you can't control what happens in this house. Hiding me upstairs like something you're ashamed of only proves his point. Something flickered across his face. Frustration, maybe, tangled up with an admiration he clearly wasn't used to feeling in the middle of a crisis. This isn't the moment to be stubborn, Julia. I'm not being stubborn. I'm being useful. Titan trusts me. If your brother's counting on chaos, 2 calm hands on that leash instead of 1 might be the difference between him getting inside this house and not. Headlights swept across the courtyard windows, cutting the argument short. Get behind me, he said. And this time it wasn't a request either, but she didn't argue, because his voice had dropped into something that sounded less like command and more like fear he couldn't afford to show. Whatever happens, you don't step in front of me. Not for anything. 3 car doors slammed in near unison outside. Then a 4th, slower, deliberate, the sound of someone who wasn't worried about being heard. Dario. The voice that called through the courtyard was smooth, almost lazy, dragging out the name like a joke only he found funny. Come out and say hello to your brother. It's been too long. The man beside her. Dario, she reminded herself. A real name finally hung on him. Exhaled once, slow and even, and set his hand on Titan's collar. Stay close to me, he murmured to Julia. Whatever he says, don't answer him. Whatever he offers you, don't take it. He's better at sounding kind than I am at sounding threatening, and that's how he stayed alive this long. They stepped out into the courtyard together. Titan pressed silent and taut between them, and the man waiting by the gate turned to face them with a smile that didn't reach anywhere near his eyes. He looked enough like Dario to be unsettling. Same jaw, same build, tattoos climbing his neck in a different pattern, but where Dario's presence felt like a held breath, his brother's felt like the half-second before a car crash, all momentum and no brakes. So this is her. His eyes slid to Julia, slow and assessing, the way you'd look at something you were deciding whether to buy. The groomer who tamed the killer dog. I have to admit, brother, I didn't expect you to fall for the help. Say what you came to say, Enzo. I came to remind you the house isn't yours by right. It's yours because our father was sentimental, and sentiment doesn't hold up in front of the people who actually matter. Enzo's gaze flicked to Titan, and something ugly moved behind his eyes. That dog was supposed to be mine. Everything in this house was supposed to be mine. You had your chance to prove you could handle what comes with it, Dario said, voice like stone. You proved the opposite. Every single time. I proved I'm not afraid to do what needs doing. Enzo's hand drifted toward his jacket, unhurried, almost bored. Unlike you, standing there with your groomer and your dog, playing house like the last decade never happened. Titan's growl deepened into something Julia felt in her own chest, and Dario's grip on the collar tightened until his knuckles went pale. Last warning, Dario said. Get off my property. Enzo smiled wider, and his hand kept moving. Or what? You'll let the dog do what he did to Salvatore. He glanced at Julia one final time, and his voice dropped into something almost gentle, almost worse for it. Careful, Tesoro. My brother's dogs have a habit of outliving the people who love them. The gun cleared Enzo's jacket in one smooth motion, but Titan moved faster, a blur of muscle breaking from Dario's grip before anyone could react. Titan, no. The dog didn't listen. He never listened to anyone but Dario, except tonight. Mid-lunge, a single word cut through the chaos in a voice that wasn't Dario's at all. Down. It came from Julia, sharp, absolute. the same tone she'd used to steady 100 frightened animals over 100 grooming tables. And impossibly, unbelievably, Titan's body hit the ground 3 feet from Enzo's throat, chest heaving, muscles locked, obedient. Enzo froze, gun still raised, eyes wide with the specific shock of a man who'd just watched his own plan collapse in real time. "That's not possible," he said. "Believe it," Dario said. And in the half-second his brother's attention split between the dog and the woman who'd just controlled him. Dario closed the distance and drove his shoulder into Enzo's chest, slamming the gun arm wide and up as it fired into the night sky. The shot echoed off the courtyard walls, and then there were bodies everywhere. Marco and 2 more men pouring out from the house. Enzo's own men hesitating at the gate, caught between loyalty and math they were suddenly doing in their heads about which brother was actually winning tonight. "Stand down," Dario barked at them, wrestling the gun free from Enzo's fist and leveling it at his own brother's chest without a flicker of hesitation. "All of you." Now, one by one they did. Enzo lay pinned beneath his brother's knee, blood trickling from a split lip, and for the first time all night, the smile was gone completely. "You wouldn't," he rasped. "Not your own blood. You stopped being my blood the night you let that camera into my house." Dario's voice was ice, flat and final. "You didn't come here to remind me who I am, Enzo. You came here to take something from me. And you almost succeeded, until she stopped your dog from becoming your alibi." Comment below. Did you think Titan was actually going to listen to her? Or were you holding your breath, just like Julia was? Enzo's eyes cut to Julia, fury and disbelief tangled together. "You," he spat. "You had no right." "I had every right," she said, stepping closer despite every instinct screaming at her to stay back, because she was done being spoken about like she wasn't standing right there. "You made me part of this the second you posted that footage. The second you threatened me by name. I didn't ask for any of this. But I'm not going to apologize for stopping a man from putting a bullet through someone." She stopped herself, the word catching before it could fully form. But it was too late. Everyone in that courtyard had heard the shape of it. Dario's eyes found hers over his brother's pinned body, something raw and unguarded breaking through the control he'd worn like armor all night. Marco cleared his throat, breaking the moment just long enough to be useful. "Boss, what do you want done with him?" Dario looked down at his brother for a long moment, weighing something Julia couldn't see the shape of. Years of history, old wounds, whatever father had once tried and failed to hold this family together with sentiment alone. "Take him to the East Wing. Lock him in. Nobody touches him until I decide what happens next." He rose, hauling Enzo up by the collar and shoving him toward Marco's waiting grip. "And find out who else helped him get that phone onto my property. Tonight. I want a name before sunrise." "Boss." They dragged Enzo away, still shouting something about blood and birthright that dissolved into the dark. And slowly, the courtyard emptied until it was just Dario, Julia, and Titan, panting quietly at her feet, like nothing extraordinary had happened at all. "He listened to you," Dario said quietly, staring at the dog like he was seeing him for the first time. "Not me. You. I don't know how. I just—" She shook her head, still catching her breath. "I said the word like I meant it. That's all obedience ever really is. Trusting the person telling you to stop. That's not all it is." He crossed the space between them slowly, and this close. In the aftermath, the exhaustion and the tattoos and the terrifying calm all fell away into something far more human. "I've spent 11 years making sure nothing in this house depended on trust. Trust gets people killed in my world. And then you walked in tonight and made a killer dog lie down with one word. Maybe your world needed something it was missing. Maybe it did." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair back from her face with a gentleness that felt almost unbearable after the violence of the last hour, his tattooed hand impossibly careful against her skin. "I told you earlier I'd drive you home myself if you still wanted to leave after a week. That offer still standing?" "No." His voice dropped, rough and certain, the same tone he'd used to make Titan sit, except this time it was aimed entirely at her. "Because I already know what happens if you walk out that gate tonight. My brother knows your face. My enemies will know your name by morning. And I am not going to spend the rest of my life wondering if I let the one person who ever made this house feel less like a war zone disappear because I was too proud to ask her to stay." "Then ask." He didn't answer with words. He closed the last of the distance between them, his hand sliding to the curve of her waist like he'd been waiting all night for permission. And when he finally spoke, it wasn't a request at all. "You're mine, Julia. Starting tonight, you're mine." If this story had your heart racing as much as it had ours to write, smash that like button, drop a comment telling us your favorite line, and subscribe so you never miss the next one. Trust me, this family story is far from over.